I'm really excited about this session. This is a very important topic for really anyone who finds themselves in a new cultural context, or even just someone who moves to an entirely different city. Culture shock can impact us all in ways that are broadly the same in terms of the pattern, but they can meet us differently. So I'm excited to hear from our guest today about the specifics of what it looks like when you're experiencing culture shock and how you can help to get through culture shock. But I will start by saying a few things about International House. So if you are unfamiliar with International House, we are an organization that really broadly supports international students and scholars in Philadelphia. So a lot of the work we've done this past year has been bringing students and scholars together from different schools, different colleges across the city for events and activities. And we also provide programs and resources to help students succeed during and after their studies. So, for example, we have an international student and scholar guide to Philadelphia, and resources like this webinar. So hopefully, if you haven't joined us for anything before, you will think about doing so from now on. You can join our mailing list through this QR code at the top, or our Discord community, which is a special community just for international students and scholars in Philadelphia. And of course, we have Instagram and Facebook. Those are good ways to keep up with our activities as well. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Cara Blouin. Cara is a psychotherapist in private practice and has been teaching English as a second language in the US and China for more than 20 years now. Welcome, Cara. Are you ready to get started?
I absolutely am. Hi, everyone.
Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen and you are welcome to go ahead.
Before I start, I would love to know just a little bit about who is here. If you wouldn't mind typing your home country into the chat, I would love to see where people are from. And if you're not sure how to use the chat at the bottom of the screen, that should be one of your options. Thank you, Bill, coming from England. Anyone else able to share where you're from? I'm going to give another second and I'll type, and then I'm going to give it up.
We have one in the Q&A as well.
Oh, and we have one in the Q&A. Nice. I think my chat is disabled. Oh no. Oh, chat is disabled.
Thank you for that. Let me try and fix that. Thanks.
Awesome. And I have someone from India as well. I'm glad I was able to see you in the Q&A there, and I'll keep this here so that if you say anything, I'll be able to see you. And meanwhile, Bill will check at the chat. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So just to define what I mean by, oh, there's another one. Hi, from Nigeria. Just to define culture shock, what I mean when I say culture shock, the feelings that are common for people when they are adjusting to a new culture. And of course, culture shock is much bigger than that, but a simple definition is to say that these are the feelings that we expect people to have when they are adjusting to a new culture. And people have done research on culture shock, and there are some things that we already know about this experience. We know that culture shock usually follows a particular pattern for people when they come to the new culture. And the pattern is a shape that looks like this line that you're seeing here. So let's talk through what this pattern is. You might recognize some of this. The first stage of culture shock is what we call the honeymoon stage. And we call it the honeymoon stage because for a new couple, when they get married, they go on a vacation together. We call it the honeymoon. And that is the time where the couple is together for the first time as a married couple. And we think of this as a time when everything is joyful and beautiful and happy. And it's also very common when people come to the new culture as a student or a traveler or an immigrant to have this time when the new culture feels wonderful. Everything feels exciting. The new things are cool. It feels like an adventure. It's a really elevated mood in the honeymoon stage. You can probably see the line that moves away from honeymoon here. And that's because most people, after they experience the honeymoon stage, then experience a pretty big drop. So we see the honeymoon, love for the new culture, everything feeling really exciting, feeling lots of energy before moving to stage 2. Stage 2 is what we call the anger stage. This is also pretty common after you've been in the new culture for a little while. In the anger stage, you start to notice that people in the new culture seem quite rude. You notice the things that the people do in the new culture that you don't really like. Maybe you notice that the streets are dirty, or that the people are loud, or that people do things that you don't really like. It seems like everything you have to do is pretty difficult in this stage, figuring out all the just like the normal things of life, the subway, how to make calls, getting the internet, just the things you need, even ordering food and going grocery shopping. All of this stuff can be really, really overwhelming. You might feel angry a lot easier during this stage, a lot more easily you will feel angry. When I think about the anger stage, I think about a friend, international student from Holland who I met in college, and I took him to the grocery store for their first time. And when he looked at the wall of all the different kinds of cereal in the grocery store, he got pretty overwhelmed. I couldn't understand what was making him so upset. He was almost crying, but he was also very angry. He said, "Why do you have so many different kinds of cereal?" And to me, that seems like such a strange reaction. But then later, when I was abroad for the first time, I remember standing in front of so many different kinds of shampoo, and I didn't know what any of those kinds of shampoo were, and I started crying, and then I understood. So both of us had hit this stage where everything is quite difficult and you can feel pretty angry. Let's look at the next stage. After anger, most people reach a coping stage. The things that were difficult are now a little bit more easy. You have figured out the basics. You know how to get from one place to another. You know how to solve daily common problems. Hopefully you've found some food that you can stand to eat. One of the hardest parts of the anger stage is finding how difficult it is to find something you really want to eat in the new place, especially if the new place is America and you are coming from a country with wonderful, beautiful, fresh food, and now you're choosing American food can be quite difficult. So in the coping stage, people have figured out how to do these things and the anger goes down quite a bit, feeling better about knowing how to get stuff done. You're figuring things out. At this stage, most people have made 1 or 2 connections, people they see every day and can talk to, feel a little bit more connected to someone in the new country. In general, at this stage, people are doing okay. You notice that that line went up and down, and so we see it going down again. After the coping stage, usually people move to a stage of depression. And this can be really serious for people who are traveling or studying abroad. Usually you'll notice you're in this stage if you're starting to feel that you don't have very much energy. It's hard to get up and do things or get the motivation to do things. You want to do the simplest, easiest thing you can find to do. Sometimes there's a feeling that there's no reason to do anything, that it's so difficult that it's not worth it. You might forget why you came here in the first place. A lot of homesickness might also come at this stage. It's important to remember that although sadness is part of depression, depression is more than just being sad. Depression is a very particular kind of feeling that can really suck your motivation, your happiness, and your energy. It's pretty common for people who are experiencing depression not to want to get out of bed. And it is very common for this to happen to international students, international travelers, and immigrants to come to this place where everything feels so overwhelming that you don't feel like you can do anything at all. Depression comes in levels, so some people will experience a little bit and some people will experience a lot. And sometimes depression does include feelings of wanting to hurt yourself or even kill yourself. If you find yourself coming to this stage and feeling a level of depression where you don't want to live anymore, or you might want to hurt yourself, please tell someone. It's really important to communicate that information to somebody so that you can get the help you need. This might be part of depression. For many people, it's not. But if it is, there are things in place to help you or someone you love who might be feeling this way. So please make sure that you reach out. A really easy thing to remember is that we have a multilingual suicide hotline in the United States. The number is 988. So just like you would dial 911 for an emergency, if you or somebody that you care about is having feelings about suicide, you can dial 988 to get help immediately. Like I said, suicide or feelings of suicide are not always part of depression, but they can be a normal part, and it's good to know what to do if those feelings arise. All right, let's go back to the culture shock stages. The fifth stage is adjustment. This is where you are neither very high up in the honeymoon stage or very low down in the anger or depression stages. This is when things start to feel normal in the new culture. Your confidence will come back. You feel more like you can do what you need to do. A sense of belonging is usually part of this stage. By now, you usually have one or two trusted friends or host family members, people that you can count on. And life begins to have normal ups and downs, just like it did at home. So instead of these extremes, this high honeymoon phase and this low depression phase, in this stage, it feels like the normal ups and downs of life. I would love to know, before I go forward, if you were able to, I can see some of you are able to be in the chat now. I'm wondering, for the people who are sitting here listening tonight, what stage do you feel like you're in right now of these stages? Honeymoon, anger, depression, coping, adjustment. Where do you feel like you are? Coping, good. A nice steady stage. Anybody else feel like still adjustment? Yeah, I get that. Adjustment, yeah, it can feel really good to reach the adjustment stage. Thank you for sharing where you are. Yeah, I feel you, anger. It's real. It can be so difficult. I remember when I was in the anger stage in my city in China, it felt like everything everybody did made me angry. Every word they said, everything I saw. So I feel you. So one thing to remember about this is that the culture shock stages don't just happen in a straight line. Most people cycle through the stages more than once. Each time gets a little bit easier. So if the first time your anger and depression are very strong, the next time you go through the cycle, you might feel anger and depression a little bit less, and your confidence in your adjustment might be even higher. So the strong feelings are getting stronger, the weak feelings are getting weaker. And this happens based on how much time you're spending in the United States. So when you first arrive, you might cycle through these very quickly. I'm angry and now I'm coping and now I'm adjusted and I'm having another honeymoon and oh, now I'm depressed again, right? You might follow that very quickly. But for people who have been here for a long time, and Bill said in the chat, still adjusting after 8 years, might find that you will come back to those feelings of depression, feelings of anger, being just in the coping stage. You will come back to them, but it will be so much further apart, so much easier to manage than it was when you first arrived. I want to give a little bit of information about what we know about neuroscience and the brain when it comes to culture shock. So I'm sure some of you are scientists and know this, and some of you don't. So bear with me while I do a little bit of vocabulary. This front part of the brain that you see circled is called the cortex, or the prefrontal cortex in English. This is the part of the brain where we do our thinking, problem solving, learning, and especially things that have to do with language. All of that stuff is up here in the front of the brain, in the cortex. The cortex functions best when you feel safe, happy, and healthy. And you've probably noticed that in your life. When you feel safe, you feel healthy, it's easier for you to do things like have complex thoughts, solve difficult problems. This part of the brain back here, we call the limbic system in English. The limbic system, in opposite to the cortex, works best when there is some danger that you need to react to. So I'm going to try to demonstrate this a little bit. Something we do is use this, this shape to represent the brain, where if you imagine your eyes are here and this is your neck, right? And so the brain is inside your skull. So the prefrontal cortex are my fingers up here, and the limbic system is down here at the base of my spine, right, or at the base of my neck, right where my spine begins. And the different parts of the brain will operate in different circumstances. So when I'm thinking, solving problems, using my second language, a lot of activity up here. When I'm reacting instinctively because there's danger, my activity is back here, and it moves the focus from the front cortex to the back limbic system. So something that's really interesting about culture shock is your brain experiences being in a new culture as a dangerous situation. The way that your brain is wired is to find things that are very new and extremely different to be dangerous and threatening. So when you come to the new culture, your brain turns on the limbic system, the system that responds to danger. That part of the brain gets activated. In the new culture, your limbic system goes up and its control and power go up. That means you will be aware of more fear. Some people even feel in the new culture that they're jumpier. They're looking for things that are new because you're not accustomed to the new environment. And so you're thinking, oh, what's happening? I don't know this place, right? The brain isn't used to the new place. And so the fear system is much higher. Because the limbic system isn't the thinking part, it's not very good at understanding what things are. It only knows, is this danger or is this not danger? And so when you come to the new culture, your brain cannot tell you being in a new culture from something really dangerous like a tiger attack, right? All the limbic part of your brain feels is danger. So now your reaction in your body will probably be bigger feelings. The limbic system is turned on, it's sensing danger, sensing a threat, and you might cry more easily, get angry more easily, be excited more easily because your feelings are turned way up in the limbic system. This can be very stressful to the body because when you're in a new culture, it's not a short thing. Like a tiger attack is usually pretty short, but being in a new culture is a longer period of time. And as your limbic system is in control for more and more time, you might feel headaches, stomach aches. People feel a lot of tension in the jaw and also in the shoulders when they're in the beginning of culture shock because their brain is in this alert, high level responding to danger. And the body can't handle being at that high level for such a long time. The body gets very stressed when the limbic system is in control for too long. Also, when the limbic system is in control, the cortex cannot work as well, which is really bad news for you if you're an international student, because the cortex is the part of your brain that does your thinking. And if you're here to study, especially if you're studying language, but even if you're not, you're studying in your second language, the fact that your limbic system is turned on is making it harder for your cortex to do your thinking and language processing. Also, because of the energy required to keep the limbic system running, you might have some sleep problems. For example, not being able to sleep or sleeping too much. That's pretty common with culture shock. You may also struggle to understand and problem solve as well as you did when you were at home. Remember, the limbic system is not designed for thinking and understanding. It's designed to respond to danger. The limbic system always acts like there is serious danger. All the chemicals in your body that respond to danger are high when the limbic system is in control. It always has a big reaction, even if the problem is small. The limbic system is not good at understanding big threat, little threat. It only understands yes threat or no threat. So it's useful to know what activates the limbic system. How do we get in this high danger state that is making us tired and sick and struggling to think? The first thing is stress, something that international students, travelers, and immigrants experience a lot. Stress will turn the cortex down and the limbic system up. New things that your brain isn't used to, doesn't have a plan for, doesn't have a system for, will cause the cortex to go down and the limbic to go up. And being alone. The body feels safer when it knows that you have people you can talk to and depend on. And so when you're alone, the cortex will go down and the limbic system will go up. You can see, looking at this, that being an international student or being in a new culture is a recipe for a high limbic system. So many of the things that happen with culture shock and happen with being in a new place are things that bring the limbic system high and bring the cortex low. So I think we all want our cortex back. We don't want to stay in this high limbic state where the brain believes we're in danger. It's bringing these chemicals that make it hard for us to sleep, hard for us to think. Our emotions are really big. We don't really want to stay there. So what can we do to get back to the front of the brain where the cortex is in charge? One of the best things you can do is talk about what is going on with you. Telling other people about your experience brings the focus from the danger section of the brain in the limbic system back to the front thinking part where you're doing problem solving and language things. It does not matter what language you are speaking in, but talking does help. Something good to think about is that big feelings coming from your limbic system, fear, anger, depression, they kind of behave like small children. If you ignore them, they get bigger and bigger and they make more noise and they do more to get attention. I'm sure you've noticed if you're sad and you pretend you are not sad, the sadness only becomes stronger. If you're afraid and you pretend you are not afraid, the fear only becomes stronger. Anger, same thing. Push it down, it will come right back up. The same thing. If you pay attention, just like a small child, the feeling will calm down. The best thing you can do for a painful feeling is to say, yes, this feeling is here. Don't push it away. Don't try to pretend it's not there. In fact, there's a research study that shows that you can calm your limbic system just by saying the feeling. By saying to yourself or to somebody else, I feel homesick, it will decrease the levels of cortisol and other chemicals that are coming from your limbic system and lead you to feel calmer. It's great to talk about how you feel in your own language, but if you can only use the second language, it also works. Other things that we know will bring the cortex up and the limbic system down, nature and art. Being in nature will calm your limbic system. It will move from the back to the front. Looking at art will do the same thing, move from the back to the front. Listening to music, same thing. Also, we know doing things with your hands, like making something, building something, sewing, even washing dishes, these kinds of small tasks that you do with your hands will bring down the chemicals in the limbic system and bring you back to the cortex. Finally, we know that moving the body can bring you out of the limbic state. And some people think that what you need to do to feel better is to exercise, but that's not really true. Any kind of movement helps take you out of the limbic and back to the cortex, even if it's just a gentle walk or a gentle stretch. So the last thing I want to talk to you about as an option is psychotherapy. As I said, When you want to bring your cortex back online and calm your limbic system, talking about feelings is very important to your health, not just to your emotional health, but also to your physical health. Remember that one study showed that saying how you feel will immediately calm the body. We know that talking about what is happening to you will help you feel better mentally and physically. Now that's easy for me to say, right? Of course, talk to somebody, but here you are in a totally different culture. Sometimes you don't have friends here. You might not have anybody to talk to here. And it might be that the people who are at home don't understand what you're talking about. They haven't gone through culture shock and they can't get it. So then what can you do? A therapist, a psychotherapist like me, is a professional helper. That is a person who understands the things I just talked about the culture shock cycle, about the limbic system and the cortex. It's a person who already knows strategies to help you move through culture shock. And something to really understand about a therapist is that your relationship with a therapist is a real relationship. It's a little bit strange because you pay for therapy just like you pay for any other medical service, but the relationship you have with a therapist is a true relationship. Kind of think about a nanny, right? You pay a nanny to take care of children, but the nanny really loves and cares for the children. And the same thing is true with a therapist. A therapist is somebody who has expert knowledge of what you're going through, but also really cares about what's happening to you. Therapy is very popular in the United States. People in the US will go to therapy to help them work with the feelings of moving to a new place, having a breakup or a divorce, sometimes for a death in the family. Sometimes people go to a therapist to get help and guidance about their career. And some people don't have a reason. They go because they know talking about how they feel is good for their health. There are some really great resources here in Philly. I'm going to give you a link to more resources, but some examples. If you are a university student, your university almost certainly has a university counseling center with access to therapy for students. The Council for Relationships in Philadelphia has low-cost therapy available. And there are a lot of private therapists like myself in Philadelphia who you can connect with if you want to talk to somebody in this way. So if you are interested in therapy, the first thing you would do is find a therapist you like using one of those resources and make an appointment. You tell the therapist what you want. I need help moving into my career as a person in the United States. I need help dealing with the anger stage of culture shock. I'm feeling depressed and I'm trying to move out of my depression. Let them know what you want to work on. Have one meeting with a therapist. And this is really important. Decide if you like them. Choosing a therapist is actually a lot like dating. Therapy only works if you and the therapist have a good connection. So if you talk to somebody and they just don't feel right, doesn't feel like somebody you want to work with, it is very normal to tell them, thank you, you don't want another appointment, and look for a therapist you like better. Since therapy is a real relationship, you want to choose somebody you feel really good talking to. Culture shock is difficult. I think it's really important to acknowledge just how difficult culture shock is. It has a real effect on your mind, your body, and your heart. Culture shock is quite serious. It can be easier. There are things we can do to help make the necessary process of culture shock a little bit easier on you. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now because I am curious about any questions that you might have for me about any of the things that I've talked about. If you want to type questions into the chat, I'm happy to answer questions in the chat. Or actually, Bill, I don't know if they have the power to unmute themselves.
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay, so if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat. I'm very happy to answer.
Since I have the power of the microphone, I'll ask a question I have, which is, I think people quite often expect to see really quick results from therapy. They go into it with a sort of, an outcomes focused perspective. They're like, what can I get out of this, like as fast as possible? But I don't think it's not the same for everyone, right? But like, how can people expect results from one session depending on what they're going in for? Is there an idea, is there sort of an average amount of time that it takes people to work through things with a therapist? Do you have any experience with that?
I would answer your question yes and no. In my experience, most people feel better after one therapy session because of what it does for the brain to talk. But if the issue is more complicated, something like depression or being in the anger stage might take more time to get out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And of course, if you're interested in very specific goals, like career goals, those are things, that you can actually move through quite quickly.
If people are still thinking of questions, you are very welcome to continue thinking of questions and type some in the Q&A or the chat if you want. I thought I would just interject to say that something that when I worked at University of the Sciences for several years, and I think a lot of students were unfamiliar with the fact that counseling therapy was free as part of their, it was covered for students through their insurance. And many, if not most, I'm not sure about the actual sort of spread of this, but many campuses across the US offer counseling therapy just as a standard practice. So students can go and seek that on campus without having to leave. I suppose maybe another quick question, Cara, would be about confidentiality. What for people worried about spilling their deepest, darkest secrets or fears or whatever with their therapist, is there any concern about that getting out of the room?
Well, as a professional therapist, I have a strong code of ethics that I have to follow. I cannot say anything somebody tells me as therapy. I must keep absolutely confidential, absolutely secret. There's only one time when I break confidentiality, and that's if somebody tells me that they have a plan to do violence. If somebody has a plan to do violence, then I break confidentiality. But everything else, even to my supervisor, I cannot share. I can't even tell, like if somebody asks, does so-and-so go to therapy? I'm not allowed to say yes or no. I can't even reveal that the person saw me.
I think that's really helpful to know as well. I see a comment in the chat.
Ooh, I love this question. The immediate solution is to find your own community, but is it a good solution long time? Oh, I just love this. Well, and I think what you're saying is really smart, right? When you're in the small cycles of culture shock, right? When you're in that depression, anger, it makes sense to find your own people and share with them. I would not avoid this because of worry about integrating. You need a strong foundation to integrate from. If you don't find your own people for support, you won't have a strong enough base to go up and integrate into other parts of the culture. Build that foundation, find your own people in your own language. And then when you feel safe, your limbic system calms down, your cortex comes back, Your cycles are much bigger. You're feeling more adjusted. Now it's time to do the work of integration. That's such a fantastic question.
I just want to add a comment there, which is I see familiar names in the chat here. And one of the things I love about the programming we can do at International House is it brings together people who aren't necessarily from the same country or even from the same culture, but they're going through the same experience here in Philadelphia. You know, the stresses that affect the life of an international student are very specific and shared. So stresses about immigration and finances and all that kind of stuff, being away from home, being away from family, potentially, they are shared experiences. So having community with others who are going through that can be helpful too. So yeah, that's also just a thank you to the folks who come to our programming, because it's great to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Bill, because it helps solve the problem that Mehmet is talking about, right? He's saying that there's a danger that you just become so comfortable in your own slice and culture that you never go out. But in programs for International House, there are people who both understand and are also integrating, and that keeps you from getting stuck in the safety of your own community.
Do we have any other questions for Cara while we still have her? It looks like maybe that's everything. But just in case there's anything else, I'll do this last thank you very slowly. So, thank you, Cara, so much for joining us tonight. I found that to be very fascinating. I learned a lot myself. I think especially things like being able to name the fact that naming your feelings is actually helpful in a biochemical way is really helpful to know. I personally love you know, sciencey stuff myself, so knowing about the neuroscience behind it's helpful too. I see we have another question from Sanja, actually.
Oh, hi. Well, if you ask me the best strategy, I believe the best strategy is connection. The number one best thing you can do is be with and talk to people, especially people who understand. So finding other people in the same situation and speaking honestly about your situation is the best way to move through culture shock. And the other ones are good too, but that's my number one.
I think that's an excellent bit of advice to close on. And I think it's something obviously we all long for a lot of the time, and have done through the couple of years of the pandemic too. You know, I think for many students, especially any international students or scholars who are on this call who were here during that time, it was super difficult to make new friends and experience a normal life here under those conditions. So it's really helpful now to be able to do a bit more of that, getting back to building community and getting together with people and sharing. So Cara, thank you so much for that advice. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for everyone in the audience for making time to attend. And as I said, this session will be available on YouTube starting tomorrow. So you can come back and revisit any of this stuff anytime.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. It's very appreciated.
Okay, I'm going to hit the end button now. Thanks again to all. Take care. Bye.